What happens when one of Hollywood's biggest stars walks onto a late-night set expecting a normal conversation and instead gets ambushed by a host who seems determined to tear him down? In just 45 seconds of uncomfortable television, Seth Meyers went from smiling talk show host to the man who pushed Michael B. Jordan too far, sparking an exit that nobody in that studio will ever forget. The awkward hour was supposed to be light, fun, easy. That's what Michael B. Jordan thought when he agreed to sit down with Seth Meyers. He'd been making the rounds, promoting his latest project, charming audiences everywhere he went. But from the moment he walked onto that set, something felt different. The energy was off. The audience could sense it. Michael could definitely sense it. Seth opened with what seemed like a normal question. "So Michael, you've been in the industry for a while now. Tell me, do you ever get tired of playing the same type of character over and over again?" Michael smiled, professional as always. "I actually think I've played pretty diverse roles. From Killmonger to Adonis Creed to more dramatic pieces, I try to challenge myself." But Seth wasn't done. He leaned back in his chair with this look on his face, this smirk that said he had more to say. Sure, but let's be honest. Aren't they all just variations of the same tough guy with a traumatic past? I mean, how many times can you brood at a camera before it gets old? The audience went quiet. You could hear it in the room. That shift, that collective intake of breath that happens when someone crosses a line. Michael's smile tightened just a little bit at the corners, but he kept his composure. "I think that's a pretty narrow way to look at it," Michael said, his voice still calm but with an edge creeping in. "Each character has their own story, their own motivations. Just because they share some surface-level similarities doesn't mean they're the same." Seth waved his hand dismissively. Right. But come on, you have to admit that Hollywood typecasts you. I mean, when was the last time you played someone who wasn't defined by their physicality? Someone who was just, I don't know, a regular guy?" Michael shifted in his seat. "I've actually played plenty of regular guys. Not every role I take is about being physical. That's kind of the point of acting, to disappear into different people." "But do you, though?" Seth interrupted, leaning forward now. "Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you play Michael B. Jordan in different costumes. Same intensity, same brooding, same muscles on display. It's almost like you have one mode." The audience was completely silent now. A few people shifted uncomfortably in their seats. One of the cameras caught a producer in the background with her hand over her mouth, clearly shocked at where this was going. Michael B. Jordan sat there, his jaw working, trying to decide how to respond to what was quickly becoming an attack rather than an interview. "Seth, I'm not really sure what you're trying to get at here," Michael said slowly. "Are you saying I'm not a good actor?" Seth laughed, actually laughed. "I'm not saying you're not good at what you do. I'm just saying what you do is pretty limited. Like, if I needed someone to look intense and take their shirt off, you're my guy. But if I needed someone with real range, real depth, I might look elsewhere." That's when you could see it. The exact moment Michael B. Jordan's patience started to crack. His eyes went hard. His posture changed. He wasn't leaning back casually anymore. He was sitting up straight, squared up, looking directly at Seth with an expression that could freeze fire. "So you brought me on your show to insult me?" Michael asked, his voice low and controlled. "Is that what this is?" Seth seemed to realize he'd pushed too far, but instead of backing down, he doubled down. "I'm just being honest, Michael. Isn't that what interviews are supposed to be about? Honesty? Or do you only want to hear people praise you?" "There's a difference between honesty and disrespect," Michael shot back. "And right now, you're being disrespectful, not just to me, but to every role I've worked hard to bring to life. You don't know the preparation. You don't know the hours. You don't know anything about what I put into my work." "Oh, I'm sure you work hard," Seth said with that same dismissive tone. "I'm sure you spend a lot of time in the gym. That's obvious. But working out isn't the same as actual acting technique, is it?" The audience gasped, literally gasped. Some people in the crowd started murmuring to each other. One woman in the front row shook her head in disbelief. This wasn't playful banter anymore. This wasn't a host trying to get interesting sound bites from his guest. This was a host who seemed genuinely intent on tearing down someone who'd done nothing to deserve it. Michael stood up, not quickly, not in a rush, but deliberately, slowly. He stood up from that couch and looked down at Seth Meyers, who suddenly seemed to realize that maybe, just maybe, he'd made a terrible mistake. "You know what, Seth?" Michael said, his voice carrying across the silent studio. "I came here as a professional. I came here to have a conversation, to promote my work, to connect with people who might enjoy what I do. But you didn't bring me here for that. You brought me here to make yourself feel bigger by trying to make me feel smaller." Seth opened his mouth to respond, but Michael wasn't finished. "And the thing is, it doesn't work. You can sit there in your little chair with your little cards and your little jokes, and you can try to tear down what I've built, but it doesn't change anything. I've worked with some of the best directors in the world. I've told stories that mean something to people. I've put my heart into every single character I've played. And you? You sit behind a desk and mock people who are actually out there creating things. Michael, I think you're overreacting." Seth tried to say, but his voice was shaky now, uncertain. The power dynamic had completely flipped. "Overreacting?" Michael repeated. "You just spent the last 10 minutes telling me I'm not a real actor. You insulted my work, my choices, my career, and now you want to tell me I'm overreacting?" Seth looked at his producers off camera. You could see him looking for help, for someone to cut to commercial, for someone to save him from the situation he'd created. But nobody moved. Everyone was frozen, watching this play out. "I just thought we could have an honest conversation," Seth said weakly. "An honest conversation?" Michael's voice rose just slightly. "Man, there's nothing honest about what you just did. You came at me with an agenda. You wanted to provoke me, to get a reaction. Well, congratulations, you got one." Michael started to walk away from the couch. The cameras followed him. Every single person in that studio was watching him move toward the exit. Seth called after him, "Michael, come on, don't leave. We still have more to talk about." Michael stopped, turned around, looked directly at Seth one more time. "No, we don't," he said simply. "We don't have anything else to talk about. Because this?" He gestured at the set, at Seth, at everything around them. "This wasn't a conversation. This was you trying to feel important by diminishing someone else. And I don't have time for that. I don't have time for people who don't respect the work, who don't respect the craft, who think tearing others down makes them somehow better." "I respect your work," Seth protested, but it sounded hollow, empty, like words he was saying because he knew he was supposed to say them, not because he meant them. "No, you don't," Michael said, "and that's fine. You don't have to, but I don't have to sit here and listen to it either." Seth tried again. "Michael, look, maybe I came on a little strong. Maybe I pushed too hard, but that's just how I interview people. I like to challenge my guests, to get them thinking." Michael shook his head slowly. "There's a difference between challenging someone and attacking them. You know that, right? When you challenge someone, you're engaging with their ideas. You're asking them to defend their choices, to explain their process. That's fair, that's good. But what you did wasn't that. You just made assumptions about me and my work and then presented them as facts. You didn't ask, you told, you didn't engage, you judged. The audience was completely transfixed. Some people were nodding along with Michael's words. Others just sat there with their mouths open. Nobody had ever seen anything like this on The Awkward Hour. Nobody had seen a guest call out a host this thoroughly, this completely. "I've been doing this a long time," Seth said, trying to regain some authority in his voice. "I've interviewed hundreds of people, thousands, and I've never had anyone react like this." "Maybe that says more about you than it does about me," Michael responded. "Maybe it says that you've gotten comfortable, that you've gotten used to people just accepting whatever you throw at them because they don't want to make waves. They don't want to seem difficult. They don't want to be labeled as sensitive or unable to take a joke. But you know what? This wasn't a joke. Nothing about what you said was funny." Seth's face was red now. You could see it even under the studio lights. He was embarrassed, flustered, caught. "I was trying to have fun," he muttered. "At my expense," Michael countered. "That's the key part you keep missing. You were trying to have fun at my expense. And when I pushed back, when I stood up for myself, suddenly I'm the problem. Suddenly I'm overreacting. That's not how this works." One of the producers finally stepped onto the set, a woman with a headset and a clipboard. She approached Michael, carefully, like you might approach someone standing on the edge of a cliff. "Michael," she said softly, "we can take a break. We can reset. We can start over." Michael looked at her, really looked at her, and you could see the decision forming in his eyes, the calculation, the weighing of options. "No," he said finally, "we can't start over because this already happened. He already said what he said, and I already heard it. And everyone in this room heard it, and everyone watching at home is going to hear it. So there's no starting over. There's no pretending this didn't happen. He turned back to Seth one last time. You know what the sad thing is? Michael said. I actually used to like this show. I used to think you were funny, smart, good at what you do. But this showed me something different. This showed me that maybe success went to your head, that maybe you forgot what it's like to be on the other side of that desk, to be the person trying to share something they care about, only to have it picked apart by someone who doesn't understand it, doesn't appreciate it, doesn't even try to. That's not fair, Seth said, but his voice was small now, defeated. Fair? Michael almost laughed. You want to talk to me about what's fair after you spent 15 minutes telling me I'm not a real actor? After you reduced everything I've done to just being a guy who works out? Yeah, let's talk about fair. The producer tried again. Michael, please, just give us 5 minutes. But Michael was already moving again, walking toward the exit, walking away from Seth Meyers, walking away from the awkward hour, walking away from the whole situation. This interview is over, he called back over his shoulder. And unless you want to apologize, publicly and sincerely, we're done. Not just today. Done. Seth finally stood up from his desk. Michael, wait. Just wait. But Michael didn't wait. He kept walking, past the cameras, past the crew members who were standing there with stunned expressions, past the audience members who were watching him with a mixture of shock and respect. He walked straight to the door at the back of the studio and pushed through it. For a moment, nobody moved. The studio was frozen. Seth stood there behind his desk, looking lost, looking small, looking like exactly what he was in that moment, which was a man who'd made a massive mistake and didn't know how to fix it. Then the producer moved. She walked over to Seth and said something to him that the microphones didn't pick up. Seth nodded. He looked at the audience. He looked at the cameras. He opened his mouth like he was going to say something, but nothing came out. Finally, he managed, "We're going to take a break." The lights changed, the music started, but nobody in that audience moved. They were still processing what they'd just witnessed. The complete dismantling of a talk show host by a guest who refused to play along, who refused to be diminished, who stood up and walked out rather than sit there and take it. In the hallway backstage, Michael B. Jordan was already pulling out his phone, already making calls, already letting his team know what had happened. His face was calm now, composed, but you could still see the fire in his eyes. The righteous anger of someone who'd been disrespected for no good reason. One of the show's production assistants caught up to him, a young guy, maybe 22 or 23. "Mr. Jordan," he said nervously, "I just wanted to say, for what it's worth, I thought you handled that really well." What Seth said was out of line. Michael looked at him, nodded. "Thanks, man. I appreciate that. I've watched all your movies," the assistant continued, "and I think you're incredible. The range, the emotion, everything. I don't know what Seth was thinking in there." "I don't either," Michael said. "But it doesn't matter now. It's done." Back in the studio, Seth was pacing behind his desk during the commercial break. You could see him through the cameras that were still rolling, even though they weren't broadcasting. He was running his hands through his hair, talking to himself, looking at the door Michael had walked through like he was considering going after him. But he didn't. He stayed on that set. And when the show came back from commercial, he sat down at his desk and addressed the camera. "Well," he said, trying to sound casual but failing miserably, "that was unexpected. Michael B. Jordan, everybody, even though he's not here anymore." A few nervous laughs from the audience. Very few. Seth continued, "We're going to bring out our next guest. But first, let me just say that sometimes interviews get heated. Sometimes conversations don't go the way you expect. And that's okay. That's part of live television." But even as he said it, you could tell he knew how weak it sounded, how much like an excuse. The audience knew it too. They sat there politely, but the energy was gone. The fun was gone. Whatever magic the awkward hour usually had was completely destroyed. Meanwhile, Michael was in his car, heading home. His phone was blowing up with texts and calls. His publicist, his manager, his friends, everyone who'd either been watching live or had already heard what happened. Everyone wanting to know if he was okay, if he needed anything, if there was going to be fallout. But Michael wasn't worried about fallout. He was thinking about the moment he stood up, the moment he decided he'd had enough, the moment he chose his dignity over playing nice for the cameras. And in that moment, sitting in the back of that car, he smiled. Not a big smile, just a small one. The smile of someone who knew they'd done the right thing, even if it wasn't the easy thing. Back at the studio, the show was still going. Seth was still hosting, still trying to salvage what was left of the episode. But everyone there knew. The crew knew. The other guests knew. The audience definitely knew. Something had fundamentally shifted. The illusion had been broken. The carefully maintained image of Seth Meyers as the friendly, harmless late-night host who just wanted to have fun conversations had cracked wide open. And in that crack, everyone saw what Michael B. Jordan had seen. They saw the ego, the entitlement, the casual cruelty of someone who'd gotten so comfortable in their position that they forgot to treat their guests like human beings, like artists, like people with feelings and pride and boundaries. The next guest came out, an actress promoting a new comedy. She sat down on the couch where Michael had been sitting just minutes before. Seth tried to start fresh, tried to joke around, tried to get back to normal. "So," he said with forced cheerfulness, "I promise I'll be nicer to you than I was to our last guest." The actress smiled uncomfortably. "Maybe just be normal nice," she suggested. The audience laughed, a real laugh this time, but it wasn't the kind of laugh Seth wanted. It wasn't laughing with him. It was laughing at the situation, at his discomfort, at his obvious attempt to acknowledge what had happened without actually taking responsibility for it. Throughout the rest of the show, you could feel it, the tension, the awkwardness, the sense that everyone was just going through the motions until they could get off that stage and talk about what had really happened. About Michael B. Jordan standing up and walking out, about Seth Meyers pushing a guest too far and facing actual consequences for it. When the show finally ended, when the lights came down and the audience filed out, the crew stayed behind. They gathered in small groups, talking in hushed voices, replaying what they'd seen, trying to make sense of it. "Did you see his face?" one camera operator said. "Michael's face when Seth called him one-dimensional? I've never seen anyone get called out like that," another crew member added. "Not on live television. Not by their guest. Seth's going to have to address this," someone else said. "He can't just ignore it." But for that night, Seth Meyers did ignore it. He went to his dressing room, he closed the door, and he sat there in the silence, thinking about the interview that had gone so catastrophically wrong. Thinking about the moment a guest decided they'd rather leave than stay and be insulted. Thinking about how badly he'd miscalculated, because that's what it was, a miscalculation. Seth had thought he could push Michael B. Jordan, had thought he could prod and provoke and get interesting television out of it, had thought that his position as host, as the one behind the desk, gave him the right to say whatever he wanted without consequences. But Michael B. Jordan had shown him something different, had shown him that respect matters, that words matter, that you can't just tear someone down and expect them to smile and take it, that some people will stand up, will speak up, will walk away rather than participate in their own diminishment. And in doing so, Michael hadn't just stood up for himself. He'd stood up for every actor who'd ever been typecast, every artist who'd ever been dismissed, every person who'd ever sat across from someone in a position of power and been made to feel small. He'd shown that you don't have to accept disrespect, even when it comes from someone with a microphone and an audience. The story spread fast. By the time Michael got home, it was already trending online. People who'd watched live were posting about it. Clips were being shared. Think pieces were being written. Everyone had an opinion on what had happened, on who was right, on who was wrong. But for Michael, it was simple. He'd been disrespected. He'd stood up for himself. He'd left. End of story. Well, not quite the end, because the ripples from that interview kept spreading. Other actors started sharing their own stories of uncomfortable interviews, of hosts who'd crossed lines, of moments when they'd wished they'd had the courage to stand up and walk away. And through it all, Michael B. Jordan's words echoed, his calm, measured, powerful words about respect and dignity and knowing your worth, about the difference between challenging someone and attacking them, about refusing to make yourself smaller so someone else can feel bigger. Those 45 seconds, when Seth Meyers decided to attack rather than interview, those 45 seconds that led to one of the most dramatic walkouts in talk show history, those 45 seconds that reminded everyone watching that celebrities are people, that actors are artists, that everyone deserves basic respect, regardless of who's holding the microphone. Seth Meyers had wanted to create memorable television that night, and he did, just not in the way he'd intended. He created a moment that would be talked about for years, a cautionary tale about ego and entitlement. A reminder that the person sitting on the couch is there as a guest, not a target. And Michael B. Jordan? He created something too. He created a moment of dignity, of self-respect, of quiet power. He showed what it looks like to stand up without raising your voice, to be strong without being aggressive, to say no without apologizing. That's what happens when a host forgets that an interview is supposed to be a conversation, not a confrontation. When someone in power forgets that power comes with responsibility. When a talk show stops being about entertainment and starts being about ego. Michael B. Jordan walked off the awkward hour set that night, but he walked off with his head high, with his dignity intact, with the respect of everyone who saw what happened and understood why he did it. And sometimes, that's worth more than finishing an interview, worth more than playing nice, worth more than the applause of an audience that's watching someone get torn down for entertainment. He stood up, he spoke up, he walked out, and, in doing so, he reminded everyone that sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is simply refuse to participate in your own disrespect.